The facts in this bizarre case read like the twisted plot in a murder mystery.
It's the kind of thing that doesn't happen to people you know.
It's just incredible.
She was laying there on the floor. It was a nasty scene.
When I came to work, it was just like any other news day. The assignment editor said something, we got to roll. There's a police chase.
Several rounds hit another car. One officer was pulling his gun when a bullet peppered the side of his chest.
I never thought about the danger part. Everything was just blown to smithereens. It's like, what do you shoot?
Oldham County is a bedroom community to Louisville. It's a beautiful area, a lot of foliage, very country setting, large homes on big estates with a lot of acreage. In 1984, I was a police officer on the Oldham County Police Department for 22 years. Life in Oldham County at that time was very laid back. It was a typical July morning. It was hot and muggy. I was off duty because I usually work late watch, so I'd gotten off, went to bed. The phone rang. They just basically said, we got 2 people dead. When I got there, the chief came up and he goes, there's gonna be a ton of media out here.
A friend tried to contact these people earlier today by phone, couldn't get a hold of them. So the friend came out to the house, and when she drove in, she located the body of the elderly female laying outside.
I went directly to the scene, drove up the driveway, parked my cruiser, and you could see Dolores laying in the driveway. Shot in the torso. She went down, and then the suspect came up and shot her through the head. I went into the house and went down the hallway there, and Janie was in the back room. She was laying there on the floor, shot her in the back. She goes down, and then he walks up and shoots her through the head. It was a nasty scene. Dolores lived in the house alone, and Jane, her daughter, she was going to the Louisville dental school, but on a lot of weekends she would come out and stay with her mom. She had friends, and she was big into church.
It's the kind of thing that doesn't happen to people you know.
Very unpretentious, simple gals, both of them. It's just incredible.
That area was experiencing a lot of daytime burglaries. You know, burglars go where the money is. Some of the neighbors, they were concerned because they thought, oh, now it's gone from burglaries to this kind of robbery.
The way they were shot, it would almost look like an execution-style slaying.
I can make no comment on that.
Are you all looking at that possibility?
Well, we'll look at all possibilities, but we're not narrowing it down to any one factor at this time.
Robbery still a consideration?
Still a main consideration, yes, sir.
We pretty much knew that Dolores was the target. Janie just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. This lady's got millions of dollars, a lot of insurance, and you think, okay, who would benefit from her being dead?
We had an overabundant supply of suspects. First one we had was Dr. Lynch, because he was the sole heir to the estate.
Tom Lynch was her son, and he was a dentist in Arizona.
Oldham County Police are asking that anyone who may have been in this particular area over the past weekend, in particular on Sunday, and may have seen or heard something, to give them a call.
When we first got back to the police department, dispatcher said there's a Susie Newsom on the line, wants to talk to somebody. And so somebody looked at me and just said, go ahead and take that. She said, something happened to my mother-in-law. She knew they'd been killed and wanted to know, was it an accident, what happened?
Susie Newsom went to Wake Forest University, and she met Tom Lynch, who was also a student there and a basketball player. They wound up getting married shortly after graduation from Wake Forest and moved to Kentucky, where Tom was from, for him to go to dental school. Susie's lifestyle, I think she saw herself as a bit of a debutante. She came from an extremely well-to-do family.
In the early 1970s, Tom and Susan got married and eventually had 2 boys.
Tom's mother did not care for Susie. That may have set up stage for a problem. When Tom and Susie moved to Albuquerque, that was the beginning of the end of the marriage. Within a fairly short time, she returned to North Carolina with the 2 boys and then announced she wasn't coming back.
By 1984, Tom and Susie were divorced. Susie ended up living in North Carolina and Tom remained in New Mexico. At that time, during the investigation, Tom and Susie were in a bitter custody battle for the 2 boys. Tom wanted full custody.
State police say they've interviewed more than 100 people and given some of them lie detector tests in connection with the murders of 68-year-old Dolores Lynch and her 39-year-old daughter Jane. But so far, they've come up with very little.
At the beginning, Tom was a person of interest, but quickly through investigations and interviews and polygraph, he was exonerated as a person of interest. From that point in the investigation, things stalled until we got a phone call in May 1985 from North Carolina.
Sunday, May 19th, I was asleep when the phone rang, alerting me to the triple homicide. And obviously at that point you have, this can't possibly just be a coincidence. There's got to be a link here. My thought is, as I'm driving over there, it's probably a family member that's gotten upset, killed 2 people, and then committed suicide. But as soon as we got there, we very quickly determined that was not the case.
The community of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, has been rocked by the murders of 3 of its affluent residents. 85-year-old Hattie Newsom, her 65-year-old son Robert, and his 63-year-old wife Florence were found dead Sunday. All 3 had been shot, and one of them had also been stabbed. After the murders, someone tried to set the house the bodies were in on fire. Robbery may have been the motive.
Florence and Robert actually lived in Greensboro and had come to visit his mother that weekend when they were killed. Hattie Newsom was actually the matriarch of the family. She was in her 80s at the time of her death, but she was a fixture at a local Moravian church at the time. Her son, Robert, worked for a tobacco company in Greensboro, and Florence had been a long lifetime school teacher. They had 2 children. Mr. Newsom was in the foyer. He had been shot, and then his mother was actually on a small couch, and she actually had her hands in front of her as if she were praying. And she had been shot twice, once in the chest and once in the head. And Florence had multiple gunshot wounds. In the spring of 1985, Tom Lynch approached Robert Newsom and explained his concerns about the lifestyle of his 2 boys and asked for Robert Newsom's help in getting increased visitation. During this time frame, Susie had started spending time with her first cousin, Frederick Klenner Jr., or known as Fritz Klenner.
The week of their deaths, the Newsoms were expected to testify against Susie and for Dr. Lynch in a custody fight over the couple's 2 sons.
Robert III, he came over to Winston-Salem and related a very interesting story that Susie's former mother-in-law and sister-in-law had been murdered in Kentucky 10 months earlier. That immediately set us on a stage of there has to be a tie to that somehow. It just can't possibly be a random coincidence. We worked all night on that case, and the next morning I remember calling Susie. When I asked to arrange a visit, she explained to me she had plans to go to dinner with a girlfriend, and that was not going to be convenient for her. So she put me off for a day, which I thought was incredibly bizarre, that you would lose your mother, father, and grandmother to a horrific crime, and having dinner with your girlfriend's more important than talking to the police. The next day, we talked to the investigators in Kentucky and got more details on their case. After we gained further information from Kentucky, we realized that there was very similar methods of the murders there and the murders in Forsyth County. They were each shot at least one time in the chest. They were each shot at least one time in the head. The State Bureau of Investigation agent and myself rode to Rockingham County. The sheriff there had called my boss, and he thought he had information. He had concerns about Fritz Klenner, and Fritz Klenner had obtained 52 permits to buy handguns from the sheriff's office in Rockingham County.
We started focusing more of our attention on Susie and Fritz to see what was going on in their life in the early 1980s.
Fritz and Susie's alibi for that weekend is that they went together to a gun show in Atlanta, Georgia, but yet no way to definitively prove that they were in Kentucky. State Bureau of Investigation agent and myself interviewed Fritz Klenner a couple of days later, and his explanation was that he and a friend, Ian Perkins, had spent that weekend camping at a federal campground in Virginia and conveniently pulled out his wallet and had happened to keep a receipt tear-off stub from an envelope where he paid his rental fee in Virginia. Who in the world would keep such a thing unless you know that you want to establish an alibi? And as it turns out, for Fritz, Ian Perkins was his weak link. This agent and I traveled to Washington Lee University in Virginia to interview Ian Perkins. We intentionally went unannounced, and Ian Perkins was visibly shaking. He asked to light a cigarette, and he was shaking so hard he was having trouble lighting the cigarette. His explanation was that they'd gone to this campground and they'd left the campground at 11 o'clock at night and walked through the woods for 2 or 3 hours, which again made no sense. I pointed out to him that in the time frame that we're talking about, that they could have driven to Winston-Salem, killed these 3 people, and driven back to Virginia. And at that point, he started to cry and said that's what happened. He said he didn't understand that Fritz was a contract operative for the CIA and that they had been on a mission, and that his mission was to eliminate a drug dealer in Winston-Salem. Fritz Klenner was never in the CIA. He was nothing but a fraud and a phony. As the conversation ensued, we knew right then that Ian was being truthful. I mean, he was almost distraught when he found out that he had actually participated in a crime against 3 innocent people. He quickly volunteered to do anything he could to help, and that's why we decided that we needed to use him to confront Fritz. The next step was Ian Perkins had volunteered to wear a wire and confront Fritz about what they had done. After the third and final confrontation between Ian Perkins and Fritz, we contacted our district attorney, who authorized the arrest of Fritz.
When I came to work, it was just like any other news day. A lot of times with my shift, I would be driving a live truck. The assignment editor said something, we got to roll. You know, something is going on. It's out somewhere off of 150. There's a police chase.
We, at that point, had gone over to the apartment complex where they were living, and we used a covert vehicle to go by and realized Fritz and Susie was loading the Blazer in preparation to leave. And we also realized then that Jim and John, the two children, had been kept home from school that day.
The kid and Fritz and Susie loaded a bunch of guns into this Blazer and took off.
As Fritz went to leave, an attempt was made to stop him. A couple of officers tried to block him in, but the Blazer had huge wheels and tires, and Fritz simply drove up over a curb and drove around him and left. And he drove up to the first stoplight, and again, cars tried to block him in. That's when I heard a sound. It almost sounded at the time like a air impact wrench you may hear at a tire shop. And then I saw glass flying out of the side of a unmarked Greensboro police officer's car. Fritz was firing a fully automatic Uzi machine gun from the Blazer.
At this point, you don't know what you're doing. You know, all we're doing is just chasing what we hear.
Several rounds hit a car that had 3 officers in it, and one officer was pulling his gun when a bullet hit the side of his gun and shattered and peppered the side of his chest.
I didn't want to return fire into the back of that vehicle. That was definitely out, because I thought the kids were in the back of the truck.
I never thought about the danger part, being a photographer.
Fritz again drove off, and we proceeded to follow him for about 25 miles. He did go around one curve one time and stopped kind of sideways to the road and jumped out and fired back at our motorcade yet again. I was in the third car back behind Fritz's car, and then for an instant there seemed like a crack of thunder, and the vehicle just disappeared in a cloud of grayish white smoke. We stopped immediately. We all bailed out of our cars, and you could literally hear car parts falling through the trees and falling to the ground from this explosion.
Nobody really knew what the heck happened, because it just looked like everything was just blown to smithereens. There was debris here, debris there, and it's like, what do you shoot? I mean, the stuff is everywhere.
You can see just how much damage the vehicle actually occurred from the explosion. As we went into the scene, we found both Susie and Fritz on the shoulder of the road. And then we found the 2 children and 2 dogs in the back of what remained of the Chevy Blazer. I had gone to a nearby house and asked to use the phone to call my sheriff and tell him what had happened. And I came out and had a front stoop, and I'm standing there when the rain started, and it almost had the appearance that God was mad. It was actually surreal.
This is what was left of a Chevy Blazer. A tremendous explosion ripped the vehicle into pieces with the 2 boys inside. But 10-year-old John and 9-year-old Jim didn't die from the explosion.
In the chase, the boys were given cyanide and shot in the head, and then he detonated an explosive device in their Blazer and sent my ex-wife and himself into the pit of evil where they haven't hit bottom yet.
There was no reason in the world for those 2 boys to have to die. And I just wish it turned out different.
How can people from a well-to-do family, things just go amok? You know, you realize that everybody has problems in it. You could be poor, you could be rich.
Dr. Tom Lynch was not in North Carolina when all that was happening. He was in Albuquerque, where the same chaplain who had told him his mother and sister died here came knocking at his door again, this time to tell him he'd also lost his 2 sons.
It takes 10 years to grow a 10-year-old boy, and only a second to lose him.
Our investigation didn't stop then. We went further. Our investigation continued most of the summer, in fact, and ultimately linked Fritz Klenner to the two murders in Kentucky as well.
I just have to say they did an admirable job, because the information and the investigation and what came out of it and the facts, it had to be mind-blowing.
Susie and Fritz drove to Oldham County with the sole purpose to kill Dolores. Susie apparently dropped him off in that area, which is all wooded, and he hiked up to their home, to the back of it, knowing that every Sunday she went to church. So he set up there, she comes in, he shoots her, then he sees Janie come out, so he has to pursue her and shoots her. So then Susie drove back down the road, picked him up, and they drove back to North Carolina.
The facts in this bizarre case, now finally resolved, read like the twisted plot in a murder mystery.
Through their investigation, that the person responsible for the murders was Frederick Klenner, and Susan Newsom Lynch.
I think Susie was so angry about the custody battle, so Fritz told Susie, I can take care of this for you, and then we'll have the two boys. And Susie went along with it and didn't try and stop him.
I'm glad it's over. I'll still think about those two boys.
Never let them do anything. She always kept them under her thumb, and she was so paranoid of being separated from them. You know, it wasn't a love, it was just a possessive thing. And you know, they're two little angels now, and that's about as far away from her as you can get right now.